What's going on, guys? So today's video is to kind of address a comment that a viewer had made asking if I can talk about some of the things that you should look out for at an RV dealership between the point where you say, I want this unit, and you actually hitch up to it to take it home. So we're going to try to talk about that because that's a very important span of time that you need to keep a close eye on. So let's talk about it. Hang tight. I'll be right back. All right, so you've scoured all the RV dealerships in and around your area. You've finally found a floor plan that you like at a price point that you feel comfortable paying, and you have been pulled back into the office so you can start finalizing all of the paperwork, get everything from a financial perspective out of the way, whether you choose to finance or just buy your new RV outright. Well, while you're in the finance manager's office and you're going through all of that part of it, you know, the RV itself has probably been moved or is being moved to a staging area or a make-ready area where they are going to perform a PDI. And in some cases, your RV may not be ready for you that day, simply because there are some known defects that might, exist on the unit out on the dealership lot that need to be addressed before they feel that it's ready for you to pick up or take home. And those are some really important things to consider. Typically, an RV dealership will take your unit, they will move it to a staging area, and they will start working on it. And they'll go through a whole checklist of things that need to happen. So this is generally the third and final PDI that your unit will go through. The very first one typically occurs at the RV manufacturing facility, and it's not going to generally be a very in-depth PDI. It's a walkthrough just to make sure that they feel that they built the unit in such a way that it will make it to where it needs to go, so a dealership can take hold of it and begin their process of kind of going through it, making sure nothing broke en route. So the first PDI happens at the manufacturer. The second PDI typically occurs at the dealership when it arrives. And that's usually where they're going to check for things that may have fallen off during transit. Basically, like, a door may have come off of a track, a cabinet may have come loose, trim, things like that that occur just while the RV is being towed from typically Indiana to the dealership itself. So that's the second PDI. The third and final PDI occurs when you are about to take possession of your RV. Now, many dealerships, if they're good dealerships, will say, you can come pick up your unit and do a final inspection in 2 days. And that's so they can move the unit to a staging area and perform all of the repairs and go through a checklist just to make sure that you're getting a unit that's in, pretty good shape. Now, this doesn't always occur, and if you're in a hurry and they see that you're in a hurry, well, they may just want to get rid of the unit as quickly as possible, and they'll just go through it very quickly. They might have you walk through the unit. In some cases, they're going to try to get you to complete all the financial aspects before they let you walk through the unit for final inspection, and I don't agree with that. I think you should be able to walk through it, make sure everything's taken care of before you pay for it. If there are items that need to be addressed simply because maybe they don't have the part in stock, or they don't have the right person to do the repair, they need to put in writing that that repair will be performed to your satisfaction by a certain date over a certain period of time, simply because you don't want it to be an open-ended agreement that something's going to get repaired and all of a sudden 2 months later your RV still hasn't been repaired. So you definitely want to make sure that you have all of those terms written out. But we're not focusing on that specifically in this video. What we're focusing on are the things that occur to your unit and the things you can inspect for before you actually take your unit home, regardless of how much time has actually gone by or lapsed. The first thing that you definitely want to focus on during your walkthrough before you hitch up to it and leave are any glaring oversights in quality. Basically, if you see any trim coming loose, if you see anything broken loose, if you see, any large scratches or scuffs, basically the things that you would look at in any type of product and go, I'm not going to take it unless these things are fixed. Those are glaring things. Now, the more subtle things are going to be components that have to operate properly in order for you to actually enjoy your camper, such as your plumbing system, your electrical system, maybe your cable system. The things that you need to really go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that they're functioning before you take your RV out for the first time, because if they don't function, then you're going to have a failed trip and you're just going to have a totally miserable experience with your new RV. Those are the things that I think you really need to create a checklist for, such as make sure all of your slides open and close properly, that there's no binding, there's no strange sounds, everything appears to work the way it should. Secondly, your plumbing. You want to make sure that they at least fill the tank halfway up with fresh water, that your pump operates both on the battery as well as when you're plugged into shore power, so it's going through the converter or it's going through the 12-volt battery system, regardless of what you're connected to at any given time. You want to make sure that there's no leaks. You also want to make sure that your tanks are operating properly, that you don't have any issue with draining your black or gray tank. You want to make sure there's water in both of those so you can at least demonstrate that they aren't failing, that there's no problem, that nothing's jammed inside of them. You want to make sure that all of your power outlets work, your fans, all of that. Here's a big one. You want to make sure your cable system works. I'm not talking about your cable operated slide. That all goes back to my first point of, putting your slides out and in and making sure they're working. But your TV cable, if you plan on using that, you want to make sure that when you connect to it, you actually get a signal on the other end. And one way you can test for that is actually just buying a cable test kit off of Amazon. It might be a $20 charge, and you can tone out your actual connections and just make sure that you're getting connections where they need to be. You want to make sure that all of your lighting is working, as well as look for any, rubber seals that might be binding or torn that could indicate, some type of a leak or a problem in the future if you were to go over wet roads. Look underneath your slides, make sure all the rubber seals are on the bottom and the side, everything appears to be intact. There are so many reasons why you might want to hire an RV inspector to actually come out and look at the unit as well. It's going to cost some money, it's going to be an investment, but it's an investment now that might alleviate headaches later, especially if those headaches occur at an RV park. So these are all things you want to pay very close attention to, because they can all dictate how you view RVing now and in the future, and if you feel that you'll have buyer's regret. So, you definitely want to focus in on those. Other things you want to test before you pick up and take off with your RV is you want to make sure that if you have an auto leveling system, that it's working properly, that you're not dealing with any jack leg that isn't reaching the ground, or possibly running into an issue to where the battery's so low that it's causing the system to go into an error mode. You want to make sure all of your side marker lights work. Here's a big one. If you have awnings on your RV, make sure that they're attached flush to the sidewall of your RV. If you see any gap, basically in this spot right here, if you see a gap between this and your sidewall, it means that the screws might not be seated properly. They're not on a backer, which means that your awning could prematurely fail because it could come detached from the sidewall. Make sure all your baggage doors open and close properly, that they don't bind. You want to basically go through and check the list in your mind of anything you might use on the RV when you're camping. Your faucets, outlets, shower, things like that. Mentally envision what you plan on using the RV for, your first trip, and things that you might plug into outlets, things that you might want to use in the bathroom, different features, and all of the components that you're going to have to use to have a successful first trip. These are things that you want to monitor. You want to make sure you test at the dealership that can be addressed before they become problematic at an RV park. Now, it does stink to think that these problems can occur on a brand new unit, but we all know that they do happen. We all know that it's very prevalent in the RV industry for you to have an RV that potentially is going to have problems. So knowing that, going into a dealership with that information can help you make a better informed decision whenever it comes to actually going through the checklist of things that could end up being problematic on your very first trip or your second trip out. Check all the bolts. Make sure that they go through and they tighten all your lug bolts. Make sure they go through and they torque them down with a torque wrench. Your suspension components, make sure there's no premature wear there. There have been units that have actually had suspension component failures simply likely occur because the hotshot driver who pulled it down from Indiana hit a big pothole or had to do some type of an emergency braking maneuver, or just something that occurred en route that caused a suspension component to fail, to become weak, to loosen. These things occur, and most times even the hotshot drivers don't know that it happened because they deliver so many of these things. They do their quick inspection of it when they pick it up, they do their quick inspection of it when they deliver it, and they don't know that different things may have occurred because they don't check every little thing. These are things that if you check before you actually get into your first campground, if you check before you've pulled it off of the dealership lot, you can likely address, fix, and prevent them from being challenges during your first shakedown trip. So what I encourage you to do is to let it spend as much time as possible at the RV dealership before you decide to take it home. Go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Let them go through it with their checklist. If you rush them to get a unit because, let's say, you know, I expect that I can go to a dealership on Friday, buy a unit, and have it camping at my first RV campground by Saturday, well, you may find that that rushed process causes the dealership not to be able to go through it the way they might normally to ensure that you have the best possible experience. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because there's a likelihood, and there's actually a pretty high percentage of RV owners who get their first RV, they get so excited, they rush through the process because they can't imagine that it should take days to buy their RV. They get it out and they have a pretty bad experience simply because they didn't allow the dealership to do the things that they need to do to button everything up, to get everything addressed before they decided to take it out on their first trip. These are very important steps. When you buy an RV, I would probably say, regardless of your opinion of this RV dealership or another RV dealership, an RV dealership largely does not want to have a negative Google review. They don't want to have a customer coming in yelling at them in front of other customers that the product they purchased was junk. They don't want to go through that. That's all inconveniencing. They want to try to sell you a product with the fewest number of issues as possible because they do want you to be a return shopper. They do want you to come back and buy another RV from them. So if you rush the process of purchasing and getting your RV without giving the dealership the amount of time they may need to ensure that the product you're buying, it's at least in the condition that they want you to receive it in before you leave, I think that's important. And don't let an RV dealership pressure you and rush you into getting it off their lot. It may be you that wants them to keep it longer, and the dealership is like, well, let's get this thing done and get you on your way. Well, oftentimes you can tell them, you know what, I'd like to leave it here for another day or so. Can you guys please go through everything? Just make sure it's working properly. Make sure the slides work. Make sure I don't have any electrical issues. Make sure my plumbing works. They'll often do that for you as long as it's a request that you make. So if they don't offer it up right off the bat, it might be something worth considering asking them whenever you go to actually buy your RV as well. And that might be even something you can bake into your request before you've even selected a unit. You could ask them, you know what, if we decide to buy an RV from you all, can you guys keep it in your PDI area for a couple of days and just have your guys go through everything? We just want to make sure we have a quality unit with the least number of problems possible, because we understand getting into RVing can, you know, be a big headache if you have RV problems. So we want to have a great experience at your dealership, and before we even consider buying one from your dealership, we would really like it to spend a couple of days, you know, in your PDI facility going through every little thing, because the more problems you uncover and fix are the fewer problems we will have when we go camping. Anyways, guys, I sure hope this addresses the question that was asked by a commenter. I hope this has helped you all in your RV search, and hopefully it's good information. Anyways, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we will be back to talk to you soon.